Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a Redux review of the Frank Ocean album Endless. I am here covering the CD quality version of Frank Ocean's 2016 album Endless. Frank Ocean is a singer, a songwriter, a multi-instrumentalist, someone who quickly went from Odd Future Wolfgang Kill Them All appendix to pop and R&B superstardom. That transition was quick and miraculous, especially considering just how little material he put out to get there, and how long he kept fans waiting to finally hear his follow-up to his huge, explosive breakout album Channel Orange, with there being 4 years of release time in between that record and 2016's Blonde. Originally, the project was titled Boys Don't Cry, there were numerous, release date pushbacks, Frank continually disappearing from the limelight again and again and again. I mean, this would basically be career suicide for any other up-and-coming artist. But once he did actually hit fans up with new music in 2016, with the album Blonde, he also hit listeners with a visual, musical art piece titled Endless. I guess to sort of add to the depth of this long-awaited release, or get fans' mouths watering for the Blonde album. I guess in retrospect, I don't fully understand what Frank's motivations were in releasing both of these projects pretty much at the same time. My first impressions of Endless is that it was a sweet, sad, semi-ambient experience, but admittedly at the time, my sights were more set on Blonde because it seemed like the bigger release, the more necessary listen, the more pressing issue. My original review for both records commended Endless, but mostly glossed over its finer details, as I kind of wrote it off as a weird B-side oriented visual art experience of maybe just a lot of extra bits that didn't make the final cut of the album. But upon closer inspection with this new release, my feelings on Endless have changed, because this record is undoubtedly its own musical experience. Aesthetically, in contrast with Blonde, Endless is far more spacey, dreamy, even prettier. There is a persistently moody vibe throughout this record, with an incredibly glossy, reverby sheen on nearly every piece of instrumentation here. It's not nearly as direct or self-affirming as Blonde, but I would actually argue that's part of Endless's appeal. It's not really a deep, longing stare into someone's soul. It's more like a lack of eye contact, actually, while curling up in a ball under a sheet in bed in the throes of depression, tumbling further into an emotionally dark, psychedelic abyss where it's just hard to really get a firm grasp on anything, as musical ideas and sounds kind of fade away or slip out of the auditory view of the listener repeatedly across the record, transitioning into different sound palettes or musical passages. We have a ghostly but idyllic Isley Brothers cover, dejected rap verses, lo-fi Bandcamp beats, dramatic acoustic balladry, and abstract neo-soul, all kind of flipping by like a sketchbook in fragmented segments. Still, single songs, individual moments on this album, but they're all kind of melted together pretty lovingly, blurred into each other super aggressively. Even when there's a song on here that ends a little early or feels somewhat unfinished, Frank is quick to throw in a musical passage or another song or a vocal snippet or something to kind of support the ending of that moment, to bring it into something else. It's like this beautiful, gorgeous, non-ending, endless compositional collage. And while I know this record was not recorded in a bedroom, a lot of it does sound a lot like very lonesome, intimate, reverby bedroom pop, which gives the album a very distinct aesthetic and leaves the entire thing feeling like a distant memory even when you're listening to it right there and now. The entire thing works really holistically as a melancholy bliss. Some of the musical ideas are a little derivative, and sometimes the lyrics might feel a little too frank, in that some of the things he's saying don't feel that poetic, they feel like just very blunt descriptions of feelings that he's having, or situations he might find himself in, or minor little details that he might just be making reference to for whatever reason. I think the song HIGGS is a prime example of that if we were to look at the lyrics. Clearly the lyrics on this track don't have much in the way of rhythm or meter. Frank is just kind of going off at the mouth a little bit. It's like a sad acoustic diatribe, but the raw emotional performance that Frank brings to the track is actually a pretty nice swap out for a much more structured and catchy and maybe more even-tempered song, which Blonde has in spades. And don't get me wrong, I love Blonde. I think it's a great record. However, I do find it kind of refreshing on Endless over here to hear Frank kind of performing on a tightrope without a net, artistically speaking. He's just throwing a lot of very raw, ungroomed ideas out there, and with some artists that can go very wrong. Kind of looking at you, Kid Cudi. Kind of looking at you, Miley Cyrus. But in the case of Frank Ocean, it works incredibly well, especially since even though a lot of these songs don't seem to be all that fleshed out on the micro level, he does a great job to make sure that they all work together as endless. They all work together on a macro level. So while Blonde might have the better single highlights like Solo and Pink and White and Self-Control, I'm actually finding Endless to be equally addictive for its emotional and sonic cohesion. Not necessarily for how tracks like XENONS and Comme des Garçons and Unity might work individually. I would say the one downside to this record is that there are some songs and there are some moments that I do wish were longer or developed a bit more because it would have brought a higher emotional peak on the album, of which there are very few. I mean, it's all a very interesting, beautiful, engaging, stimulating experience with how much Frank kind of throws at the listener across the runtime of this record. But a lot of it does kind of breeze by without much in the way of an overall progression, because if you put this album on an infinite loop, you could probably drop in at a number of points and the experience would be vaguely the same. Though the Isley Brothers cover is a really great start, but so could a number of other tracks on here be. But overall with Endless, I'm incredibly happy that I picked up a CD quality version of this thing and gave myself the opportunity to go back and really soak it in, because it was kind of difficult to do that with it being released at the same time as Blonde. Because in doing so, I definitely respect and admire what Frank did on this album so much more, and also just really love the fact that he was able to come at this record with a totally different creative mindset than he did on Blonde, and pretty much have it be an equally fulfilling experience. In some ways, creatively, conceptually, stylistically, this has even more diversity than Blonde, as it seems like Frank is experimenting with more instrumentation, more genres, more samples, weirder sounds and effects and transitions, which is definitely up my alley personally, though I could definitely see why most people would enjoy the Blonde experience over the Endless experience. I'm feeling a decent 2-strong 8 on this record. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Frank Ocean, forever.